Moynihan. Negro Family, The Case for National Action. Introduction. 200 years ago, in 1765, 9 assembled colonies first joined together to demand freedom from arbitrary power. The first century we struggled to hold together the first continental union of democracy in the history of man. 100 years ago, in 1865, following a terrible test of blood and fire, the Compact of Union was finally sealed. Century we labored to establish a unity of purpose and interest among the many groups which make up the American community. Struggle has often brought pain and violence. It is not yet over. State of the Union message of President Lyndon B. Johnson, January 4, 1965. United States is approaching a new crisis in race relations. That began with the school desegregation decision of the Supreme Court, and ended with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the demand of Negro Americans for full recognition of their civil rights was finally met. No matter how savage and brutal, of some state and local governments to thwart the exercise of those rights is doomed. The nation will not put up with it, least of all the Negroes. The present moment will pass. In the meantime, a new period is beginning. The expectations of the Negro Americans will go beyond civil rights. Americans, they will now expect that in the near future equal opportunities for them as a group will produce roughly equal results, as compared with other groups. This is not going to happen. Nor will it happen for generations to come unless a new and special effort is made. For 2 reasons. First, the racist virus in the American bloodstream still afflicts us. Negroes will encounter serious personal prejudice for at least another generation. 3 centuries of sometimes unimaginable mistreatment have taken their toll on the Negro people. Harsh fact is that as a group, at the present time, in terms of ability to win out in the competitions of American life, they are not equal to most of those groups with which they will be competing. Negro Americans reach the highest peaks of achievement. But collectively, in the spectrum of American ethnic and religious and regional groups, where some get plenty and some get none. Some send 80% of their children to college and others pull them out of school at the 8th grade. Negroes are among the weakest. Most difficult fact for white Americans to understand is that in these terms the circumstances of the Negro American community in recent years has probably been getting worse, not better. Of dollars of income, standards of living, and years of education deceive. The gap between the Negro and most other groups in American society is widening. The fundamental problem, in which this is most clearly the case, is that of family structure. The evidence, not final, but powerfully persuasive, is that the Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. Class group has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled, poorly educated city working class the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. There are indications that the situation may have been arrested in the past few years, but the general post-war trend is unmistakable. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. The thesis of this paper is that these events, in combination, confront the nation with a new kind of problem. Measures that have worked in the past, or would work for most groups in the present, will not work here. Effort is required that will give a unity of purpose to the many activities of the federal government in this area, directed to a new kind of national goal, the establishment of a stable Negro family structure. A new departure for federal policy, and a difficult one. Almost certainly offers the only possibility of resolving in our time what is, after all, the nation's oldest, and most intransigent, and now its most dangerous social problem. Myrtle said in An American Dilemma remains true today. America is free to choose whether the Negro shall remain her liability or become her opportunity. 1. American Revolution is rightly regarded as the most important domestic event of the post-war period in the United States. Like it has occurred since the upheavals of the 1930s, which led to the organization of the great industrial trade unions, and which in turn profoundly altered both the economy and the political scene. Few other events in our history, the American Revolution itself, the surge of Jacksonian democracy in the 1830s, the abolitionist movement, and the populist movement of the late 19th century, comparable to the current Negro movement, has been none more important. The Negro-American Revolution holds forth the prospect that the American Republic, which at birth was flawed by the institution of Negro slavery, and which throughout its history has been marred by the unequal treatment of Negro citizens, last redeem the full promise of the Declaration of Independence. 3. The Negro leadership has conducted itself with the strictest propriety, acting always and only as American citizens asserting their rights within the framework of the American political system. It is no less clear that the movement has profound international implications. No way a matter of chance that the nonviolent tactics and philosophy of the movement, as it began in the South, were consciously adapted from the techniques by which the Congress Party undertook to free the Indian nation from British colonial rule. It's not a matter of chance that the Negro movement caught fire in America at just that moment when the nations of Africa were gaining their freedom. Is it merely incidental that the world should have fastened its attention on events in the United States at a time when the possibility that the nations of the world will divide along color lines seems suddenly not only possible, but even imminent? That what happens in America is being taken as a sign of what can, or must, happen in the world at large. The course of world events will be profoundly affected by the success or failure of the Negro-American Revolution in seeking the peaceful assimilation of the races in the United States. The award of the Nobel Peace Prize to Dr. Martin Luther King was as much an expression of the hope for the future as it was recognition for past achievement. No less clear that carrying this revolution forward to a successful conclusion is a first priority confronting the Great Society. The end of the beginning. The events of the onset of the Negro Revolution are now behind us. Political events were three. First, the Negroes themselves organized as a mass movement. Their organizations have been in some ways better disciplined and better led than any in our history. Established an unprecedented alliance with religious groups throughout the nation and have maintained close ties with both political parties and with most segments of the trade union movement. Second, the Kennedy-Johnson administration committed the federal government to the cause of Negro equality. Never happened before. Third, the 1964 presidential election was practically a referendum on this commitment. If these were terms made by the opposition, they were in effect accepted by the president. The overwhelming victory of President Johnson must be taken as emphatic popular endorsement of the unmistakable and openly avowed course which the federal government has pursued under his leadership. Administrative events were threefold as well. First, beginning with the establishment of the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity and on to the enactment of the Manpower Development and Training Act of 1962, the federal government has launched a major effort to redress the profound imbalance between the economic position of the Negro citizens and the rest of the nation that derives primarily from their unequal position in the labor market. The Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 began a major national effort to abolish poverty, a condition in which almost half of Negro families are living. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 marked the end of the era of legal and formal discrimination against Negroes and created important new machinery for combating covert discrimination and unequal treatment. Events were no less specific, beginning with Brown. Board of Education in 1954, through the decade that culminated in the recent decisions upholding Title II of the Civil Rights Act, the federal judiciary, led by the Supreme Court, has used every opportunity to combat unequal treatment of Negro citizens. Put as a general proposition that the laws of the United States now look upon any such treatment as obnoxious, and that the courts will strike it down wherever it appears. For equality. Events behind us, the nation now faces a different set of challenges, which may prove more difficult to meet, if only because they cannot be cast as concrete propositions of right and wrong. The problem here is that the Negro Revolution, like the industrial upheaval of the 1930s, is a movement for equality as well as for liberty. Liberty and equality are the twin ideals of American democracy, but they are not the same thing. Nor, most importantly, are they equally attractive to all groups at any given time, nor yet are they always compatible, one with the other. Citizens who would gladly die for liberty are appalled by equality. Who are devoted to equality are puzzled and even troubled by liberty. Much of the political history of the American nation can be seen as a competition between these two ideals, as for example, the unending troubles between capital and labor. In large, liberty has been the ideal with the higher social prestige in America. It has been the middle-class aspiration, par excellence. Equality, on the other hand, has enjoyed tolerance more than acceptance. Yet it has roots deep in Western civilization and is at least coeval with, if not prior to, liberty in the history of Western political thought. American democracy has not always been successful in maintaining a balance between these two ideals, and notably so where the Negro American is concerned. Freed the slaves, but they were given liberty, not equality. It was therefore possible in the century that followed to deprive their descendants of much of their liberty as well. 5. The ideal of equality does not ordain that all persons end up, as well as start out equal. In terms, as put by Faulkner, there is no such thing as equality per se, but only equality to equal right and opportunity to make the best one can of one's life within one's capability, without fear of injustice or oppression or threat of violence. But the evolution of American politics, with the distinct persistence of ethnic and religious groups, has added a profoundly significant new dimension to that egalitarian ideal. Increasingly demanded that the distribution of success and failure within one group be roughly comparable to that within other groups. Not enough that all individuals start out on even terms, if the members of one group almost invariably end up well to the fore, and those of another far to the rear. What ethnic politics are all about in America, and in the main the Negro American demands are being put forth in this now traditional and established framework, cubed. Here a point of semantics must be grasped. The demand for equality of opportunity has been generally perceived by white Americans as a demand for liberty, a demand not to be excluded from the competitions of life, at the polling place, in the scholarship examinations, at the personnel office, on the housing market. Does, of course, demand that everyone be free to try his luck, or test his skill in such matters. But these opportunities do not necessarily produce equality. On the contrary, to the extent that winners imply losers, equality of opportunity almost ensures an equality of results. Semantics is that equality of opportunity now has a different meaning for Negroes than it has for whites. It is not a demand for liberty alone, but also for equality in terms of group results. Rustin's terms, it is now concerned not merely with removing the barriers to full opportunity but with achieving the fact of equality. By equality, Rustin means a distribution of achievements among Negroes roughly comparable to that among whites. Nathan Glazer has put it, the demand for economic equality is now not the demand for equal opportunities for the equally qualified, it is now the demand for equality of economic results. And for equality in education. Has also become a demand for equality of results, of outcomes. Aspects of the new laws do guarantee results, in the sense that upon enactment and enforcement they bring about an objective that is an end in itself, e.g., the public accommodations titles of the Civil Rights Act. Provisions are at once terminal and intermediary. The portions of the Civil Rights Act dealing with voting rights will no doubt lead to further enlargements of the freedom of the Negro American. By and large, the programs that have been enacted in the first phase of the Negro Revolution, manpower retraining, the Job Corps, community action, et al., only make opportunities available. They cannot ensure the outcome. The challenge of the next phase of the Negro Revolution is to make certain that equality of results will now follow. If we do not, there will be no social peace in the United States for generations. For equality. 6. Time, therefore, is at hand for an unflinching look at the present potential of Negro Americans to move from where they now are to where they want, and ought to be. No very satisfactory way, at present, to measure social health or social pathology within an ethnic, or religious, or geographical community. Are few and uncertain, and conclusions drawn from them, including the conclusions that follow, are subject to the grossest error. Nonetheless, the opportunities, no less than the dangers, of the present moment, demand that an assessment be made. Being the case, it has to be said that there is a considerable body of evidence to support the conclusion that Negro social structure, in particular the Negro family, battered and harassed by discrimination, injustice, and uprooting, is in the deepest trouble. Many young Negroes are moving ahead to unprecedented levels of achievement, many more are falling further and further behind. Intensive study of the life of Central Harlem, the Board of Directors of Harlem Youth Opportunities Unlimited, Inc. summed up their findings in one statement: massive deterioration of the fabric of society and its institutions. Conclusion of this survey of the available national data, that what is true of Central Harlem can be said to be true of the Negro American world in general. So, it is the single most important social fact of the United States today. As possible, the statistics used in this paper refer to Negroes. However, certain data series are available only in terms of the white and non-white population. If this is the case, the non-white data have been used as if they referred only to Negroes. This necessarily introduces some inaccuracies, but it does not appear to produce any significant distortions. In 1960, Negroes were 92% of all non-whites. The remaining 7.9% is made up largely of Indians, Japanese, and Chinese. The combined male unemployment rates of these groups is lower than that of Negroes. Relating to family stability, the smaller groups are probably more stable. Thus 21% of Negro women who have ever married are separated, divorced, or their husbands are absent for other reasons. Comparable figure for Indians is 14%, Japanese, 7%, Chinese 6%. Therefore, the statistics on non-whites generally understate the degree of disorganization of the Negro family and underemployment of Negro men. 2. The deterioration of the fabric of Negro society is the deterioration of the Negro family. Fundamental source of the weakness of the Negro community at the present time. Probably no single fact of Negro American life so little understood by whites. Negro situation is commonly perceived by whites in terms of the visible manifestation of discrimination and poverty, in part because Negro protest is directed against such obstacles, and in part, no doubt, these are facts which involve the actions and attitudes of the white community as well. Difficult, however, for whites to perceive the effect that 3 centuries of exploitation have had on the fabric of Negro society itself. Consequences of the historic injustices done to Negro Americans are silent and hidden from view. But here is where the true injury has occurred. Unless this damage is repaired, all the effort to end discrimination and poverty and injustice will come to little. The family in shaping character and ability is so pervasive as to be easily overlooked. The family is the basic social unit of American life, it is the basic socializing unit. By and large, adult conduct in society is learned as a child. The fundamental insight of psychoanalytic theory, for example, is that the child learns a way of looking at life in his early years through which all later experience is viewed and which profoundly shapes his adult conduct. Hazarded that the reason family structure does not loom larger in public discussion of social issues is that people tend to assume that the nature of family life is about the same throughout American society. Media and the development of suburbia have created an image of the American family as a highly standardized phenomenon. Or easy to assume that whatever it is that makes for differences among individuals or groups of individuals, it is not a different family structure. Much truth to this, as with any other nation, Americans are producing a recognizable family system. But that process is not completed by any means. Still, for example, important differences in family patterns surviving from the age of the Great European Migration to the United States, and these variations account for notable differences in the progress and assimilation of various ethnic and religious groups. Immigrant groups were characterized by unusually strong family bonds. These groups have characteristically progressed more rapidly than others. One truly great discontinuity in family structure in the United States at the present time, that between the white world in general and that of the Negro American. The white family has achieved a high degree of stability and is maintaining that stability. By contrast, the family structure of lower-class Negroes is highly unstable, and in many urban centers is approaching complete breakdown. B. There is considerable evidence that the Negro community is in fact dividing between a stable middle-class group that is steadily growing stronger and more successful, and an increasingly disorganized and disadvantaged lower-class group. There are indications, for example, that the middle-class Negro family puts a higher premium on family stability and the conserving of family resources than does the white middle-class family. The discussion of this paper is not, obviously, to the first group excepting as it is affected by the experiences of the second, an important exception. 2 points to be noted in this context. The emergence and increasing visibility of a Negro middle class may beguile the nation into supposing that the circumstances of the remainder of the Negro community are equally prosperous, whereas just the opposite is true at present, and is likely to continue so. Second, the lumping of all Negroes together in one statistical measurement very probably conceals the extent of the disorganization among the lower class group. Conditions are improving for one and deteriorating for the other, the resultant statistical averages might show no change. The statistics on the Negro family and most other subjects treated in this paper refer only to a specific point in time. They are a vertical measure of the situation at a given movement. Do not measure the experience of individuals over time. Thus the average monthly unemployment rate for Negro males for 1964 is recorded as 9%, but during 1964, some 29% of Negro males were unemployed at one time or another. For example, if 36% of Negro children are living in broken homes at any specific moment, it is likely that a far higher proportion of Negro children find themselves in that situation at one time or another in their lives. Only a quarter of urban Negro marriages are dissolved. Only a quarter of Negro women living in cities who have ever married are divorced, separated, or are living apart from their husbands. Rates are highest in the urban Northeast, where 26% of Negro women ever married are either divorced, separated, or have their husbands absent. Urban frontier, the proportion of husbands absent is even higher. In New York City in 1960, it was 30.2%, not including divorces. Ever married non-white women in the nation, the proportion with husbands declined in every age group over the decade 1950–60 as follows. Although similar declines occurred among white females, the proportion of white husbands present never dropped below 90% except for the first and last age group. Nearly 1/4 of Negro births are now illegitimate. White and Negro illegitimacy rates have been increasing, although from dramatically different bases. The white rate was 2% in 1940, it was 3.07% in 1963. In that period, the Negro rate went from 16.8% to 23.6%. The number of illegitimate children per 1,000 live births increased by 11 among whites in the period 1940–63, but by 68 among non-whites. Of course, limits to the dependability of these statistics. There are almost certainly a considerable number of Negro children who, although technically illegitimate, are in fact the offspring of stable unions. On the other hand, it may be 9. Assume that many births that are in fact illegitimate are recorded otherwise. Probably the two opposite effects cancel each other out. In the urban frontier, the non-white illegitimacy rates are usually higher than the national average, and the increase of late has been drastic. In the District of Columbia, the illegitimacy rate for non-whites grew from 21.8% in 1950 to 29.5% in 1964. Similar picture of disintegrating Negro marriages emerges from the divorce statistics. Divorces have increased of late for both whites and non-whites, but at a much greater rate for the latter. In 1940, both groups had a divorce rate of 2.2%. By 1964, the white rate had risen to 3.6%, but the non-white rate had reached 5.1%, 40% greater than the formerly equal white rate. 1/4 of Negro families are headed by females. The direct result of this high rate of divorce, separation, and desertion, a very large percent of Negro families are headed by females. While the percentage of such families among whites has been dropping since 1940, it has been rising among Negroes. Percent of non-white families headed by a female is more than double the percent for whites. Fatherless non-white families increased by a sixth between 1950 and 1960, but held constant for white families. It's been estimated that only a minority of Negro children reach the age of 18 having lived all their lives with both of their parents. Again, this measure of family disorganization is found to be diminishing among white families and increasing among Negro families. The breakdown of the Negro family has led to a startling increase in welfare dependency. The majority of Negro children receive public assistance under the AFDC program at one point or another in their childhood. At present, 14% of Negro children are receiving AFDC assistance, as against 2% of white children. Of white children receive such assistance at some time, as against 56% of non-whites, according to an extrapolation based on Hugh data. The situation may be said to be worsening. The AFDC program, deriving from the long-established Mother's Aid programs, was established in 1935 principally to care for widows and orphans, although the legislation covered all children in homes deprived of parental support because one or both of their parents are absent or incapacitated. 10. Beginning, the number of AFDC families in which the father was absent because of desertion was less than a third of the total. It is 2/3. Hugh estimates that between 2/3 and 3/4 of the 50% increase from 1948 to 1955 in the number of absent father families receiving ADC may be explained by an increase in broken homes in the population. 10. 1960 study of aid to dependent children in Cook County, Ill. Stated. Typical, ADC mother in Cook County was married and had children by her husband, who deserted, his whereabouts are unknown, and he does not contribute to the support of his children. Not free to remarry and has had an illegitimate child since her husband left. 11. The expansion of this welfare program, as of public assistance programs in general, can be taken as a measure of the steady disintegration of the Negro family structure over the past generation in the United States.